everyone, my name is Poppy. I am the author of this module and I am a PhD researcher at the University of Edinburgh looking at gender-based violence in the higher education context. So I look at GBV in UK universities. I used focus groups and interviews for my PhD fieldwork and have long been a fan, using them in many research projects before. So now I'm going to give you a super quick talk on the how part of focus groups and or interviews. You get the theory, but how do you actually go about designing, conducting and executing that theory? Great question, and an area we receive little training on and subsequently often have low confidence around, the doing part. So I'd love to share my experience and frameworks with you and get you wised up on the research instruments you'll need, which will be your rod, your toolbox for running your own successful focus groups and or interviews. Research can be a daunting, overwhelming and very non-linear process, with so many avenues, options, possibilities and findings revealing themselves to you all the time, everywhere, and pushing and pulling you in different directions. Here is the top piece of advice I was given, and that has served me endlessly with every research endeavour and helped me to anchor and navigate. The best method is the method that allows you to answer your research question. It's as simple as that. That's the headline. However, creating a good research question is often the hardest part, and it is subject to change as it becomes more refined and you discover more about the question itself, or as the direction that you want the research to go to changes as the research journey progresses. And often we just aren't told what a good research question actually looks like. It's an area of poor and deficient training. It's like one of those secrets where you think everyone else has the answer, but deep down, other people are also thinking, what is a research question and how do I make a good one or come up with one for myself? I bet everybody knows except me. The truth is, nobody else does. Let's crack the egg open. So your research question is the North Star of your research process. It is the compass that directs you. It is your navigation. It is your anchor. The top tip you could ever be given for creating a solid research question is that it needs to be two things. Number one, feasible, and number two, specific. It has to be really narrowed and focused enough on a really particular area. If you have those key details nailed down, think what, who, where, then it will be implementable. So the two go hand in hand really, feasibility and specificity. A strong research question also asks how and what questions over why, because they are automatically more narrowed and feasible. Those two characteristics that I listed before are at the beating heart of a good research question. Don't be worried though, why questions will come up at various points in your research process and design, in particular the data analysis and writing up your findings. But a good research question, good best practice when it comes to research questions, should leave the whys until the findings, until the write-ups, until the outputs, until the dissemination of the data. Your research question needs to be super narrowed and feasible. And here are some templates for you to play around with, so feel welcome to pause the video and map your topic, your question, your subject area onto these different templates. Hopefully this will offer you some inspiration and some grounding, sort of really pinning down what I was talking before about a feasible and specific question. Feel welcome to literally follow these templates and then see what rings right, see what rings true and what chimes as a really good research question and that nails down, that is what I'm looking for. Now moving on to creating what is called a research instrument for your interview and or focus group. So a research instrument is just a fancy way of saying script or data collection tool. It is the literal mechanism or micro method within your main method that allows you to collect the data you need. So the research instrument could refer to discourse, i.e. a script of questions to ask participants, or a set of activities to then fuel discussion and or observations. Creating a research instrument is helpful for a number of reasons. First of all, linking to what we've just spoken about, it allows you to test your true understanding of your research question and its components: population, context, environment, topic, ethical issues, timescales, meanings, symbols, language within your research question. Secondly, if it doesn't help you to interrogate your understanding of your research question, it can help you to come up with one in the first place. Beginning with a research instrument can be a really useful, productive starting point because it gets you to think about who and what and where you are interested in by designing something that would be useful for, serve and enhance those areas. Thirdly, it allows you to think in calculated and methodical ways about how to best draw out your data from your research context, your field, your environment, and research subjects. Stimulating and supporting these areas and these characters, these agents, in the right ways is extremely important, because this allows you to draw out the best data, which is then conducive to your research because it gives you empirical data to answer your research question. Answering your research question is the key objective of research, and if you cannot answer your research question, your research is infeasible. Let's go on to talk about the Burger model now. So this is a framework I created for coming up with an interview script initially. A longer, more detailed version of this framework is linked into the bottom of this section of the module, so you will have a chance to do a deeper dive and work with the model in an interactive and less time-restrained way later. So you can use this framework to create an interview or focus group script, so it's nice and transferable to either or both. Your burger is made up of 4 parts. Let's start at the top. The soft top bun, and then moving down you have the middle part, the meat burger or vegetarian or vegan alternative. You then have your salad and sauce, your garnishings, and then you finally have the bottom bun. So there you have your 4 elements visualised on the slide there. By the way, I appreciate that this may be quite a childish or infantilizing exercise, but actually play-based methods can be the best starting point when we're in new territory. So please bear this in mind for your actual research instrument and for when you're training others yourself one day as a researcher. So going through that list of components chronologically again, your interview and or focus group script should have the 4 parts that I've just listed. So we're just simply going to go through them, starting with your opening bun, which is otherwise called the engagement bun. So these are the questions that ease your participants into the data collection process, into their interaction with you. It is the introduction to the meal, the first part that touches their lips, and it will determine whether they want to continue. So it's vital that this stage is warm, welcoming, and soft. Moving on to the middle, the meat, the main burger, this is the substantial part of the meal, the meaty questions. These are the well-seasoned, well-cooked, rich and hearty questions that really get to the core, to the middle of what you're trying to ask and say. The meat of your data lies here, so see this as the middle body. The sauce or salad, i.e. the garnish, is the side, the flavour. This represents the prompting questions that draw out, complement and enhance the main burger. However, just because they are sides does not mean that they are secondary or subordinate. These ingredients are actually essential to glue everything together, tie everything up, to bring in flavour and to bring out more from the meal. The sauce can actually end up being your favourite part or the best part of a meal in real life. And in a research sense, it can extract flavour or highlight the best of the burger. What is also helpful and beautiful about the sauce or salad is that it is always there, one of the first and last things in the meal, and covering everything. You can go back and forth from your prompting questions whenever you like and wherever you like. They are a comfort to you, and they're there to make your meal colourful. So please don't see them as a last option. They're often actually hold key parts of data. I was going to say in the previous slide that without the middle, the way to think about the middle, the burger, is that without it, it isn't a meal. But that's so subjective. You could argue that about the garnish or the buns. So see all of these parts as equal. So last, but certainly not least, you have your soft closing bun, otherwise known as your exit bun. So your top bun is your engagement bun and your bottom is your exit bun. So your exit bun, these are the questions to close the discussion on and get any last grains or morsels out, and to ensure that your participants leave on a smooth exit, i.e. their welfare is looked after. They are full. The buns together hold the meal together and make it all make sense. As I've already said, it isn't a meal or a burger without the bread, so they are essential parts of your interview or focus group script. So remember the burger framework to create a focus group and or interview script, and you won't go wrong. So count on those 4 parts: beginning, middle, prompting questions, end, or top bun, burger, garnish and or sauce, and then the bottom bun. I hope that gives you a really helpful visual or illustration to tattoo onto your brain, to use wherever you are, because actually it's that pottering around in the shower, around the house, on the bus, where we really get our eureka moments and we plan our research design. I'm now going to take you through another option for creating your focus group and or interview script. This can be done on its own or in combination with the Burger framework. So think about what you would prefer, what's right for you, your skill set, and your research question. So you may want to consider creating an activity, or what I call an artifact, to increase the engagement of your participants. Making them as engaged and stimulated as possible is essential for gathering the data that you need. This activity also gets you to think seriously about how your participants would like to be engaged with, based on who they are and what their needs and interests are. So consider their social characteristics and identity, age, gender, culture, occupation, ability or disability. For example, are you working with children with ADHD or senior managers of a law firm? These are two very different cohorts who may appreciate two very different approaches to get the best data from them. Also consider the topic, the subject area of your research question. Think about the ethics of this. For example, are you looking at a sensitive or upsetting or distressing topic? Would participants benefit from the artifact being a welfare activity at the end, such as an imaginative or cool down or arts and crafts-based exercise? Also consider the context of the research, both the physical environment of the data collection space and the broader political and social and ecological context of the research topic. Is there space to play? Is technology available? Can you use it in the pandemic context? What are the COVID-19 policies at play? Is anything banned in the institutional country you're studying or working in? There is a spectrum in which artifacts and scripts exist on, from prescriptive and instructive through to flexible and open. You may hear most researchers articulate interview and focus group scripts or instruments as semi-structured, and my personal view is that is because the realities of design and execution mean that you will fluidly move up and down this sliding scale of a spectrum as it becomes relevant and appropriate in a live way to ask different types of questions to get the data that you need when you're interacting with your participants. The important thing is to not confine yourself and to shed ideas that closed or open questions are not appropriate. They often have these negative connotations to them. Use the full scale and experiment with different kinds of questions. Prompting questions do tend to be more closed, and they can actually be the most important, even though, as I've already said, the word closed has negative connotations. Also, aren't all scripts semi-structured, arguably, even if they are completely open and comprised only of open questions, totally open questions? They've still been pre-planned and scripted and have an aim. An instrument in itself is structure. And are closed questions actually closed when we think carefully and truly about the push and pull of power between researcher and subject? Think about how they can utilise their answers to gain power, influence and steer in the interview process. Anyway, just some philosophical questions to derail on for a few seconds. Here I'm going to show you an example of an artifact to get you thinking about your own artifact creation. Bear in mind that research instruments like this tend to be more commonly used in focus groups, but there's absolutely nothing stopping you using them for interviews. In fact, they can create really effective and fruitful interviews to have some kind of visual data, focal point, or document that arouses and stimulates data out of your research participants. So on the slide, this Snakes and Ladders game board was presented at a series of focus groups that I ran for 16 to 17-year-olds, so older children. They were all from the UK and from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and they all had ambitions to go on to higher education, so to go to university. This research was part of a social mobility programme. We played Snakes and Ladders, and the participants had to discuss what the snakes and the ladders on the board stood for or symbolised. So if you look at the snakes as representing inhibitors to accessing higher education and the ladders representing enablers. So the question here is, or was, what are the inhibiting and enabling variables or factors to accessing higher education, such as money, social connections, literacy, location, cultural capital? The students then went off after this discussion looking at the one Snakes and Ladders game board to create their own Snakes and Ladders boards individually and present them back to the room. So the question I'd like to ask you for reflection is, what would be your Snakes and Ladders board game for your own population or participants? Think of your own artefact, and again, consider their interests, occupation, age, education, abilities, all of the social characteristics and identity variables that we were thinking about before, but also be mindful about more complex and nuanced factors, such as what language, terms and concepts resonate with your participants. Do you need to run a dummy focus group or interview to determine this, to answer this question? How close are you to your research population? How well do you know them and their needs? So, for example, in my research, because it is Scottish Government funded, I had to follow the equally safe strategy and use the term or framework gender-based violence. But victim survivors do not always relate to this term. They may use terms like domestic or sexual or intimate partner violence. So consider what assumptions, what language, terms, concepts we bring to the doorstep of our own research design. And finally, consider what assumptions you have made about your participants as knowledge agents. What do you assume them to know and not know? What epistemological assumptions have you made? Why do you assume them to be the best population to talk to possess the knowledge that you need, to get the data that you desire, to answer your research question? For instance, when I conducted the aforementioned focus groups, I was absolutely blown away by the knowledge of the young people I worked with. They came from low socioeconomic backgrounds and were not even adults, and they knew about Marx and sociology and linguistics and were talking about radical and higher education level concepts. But as a tech-savvy generation, they learnt many sociological concepts from apps and social media, and they explained to me how inspirational many of their teachers and guardians or parents are. Well, what assumptions did I make about them and their level of understanding? That's something to interrogate honestly. So consider this when making your artefact and be ready to attune to the data that gets presented to you, because it may be their behaviour and reactions to the artefact that are the most interesting, or they're steering away from the artefact, or the questions you're asking, or it could be what they're not saying rather than what they are saying. That could actually be the locus where the most rich and profound data lies. Or they could surprise you with data that you did not expect from that population. So in conclusion, be ready to listen to your data and use your artefact as a vehicle to be open.